Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I would like to introduce the Dark a little bit before I introduce our esteemed speaker today. Dark is a book review journal. We started in 2022, and we've been publishing a few issues every year. And I'd request for all those who are joining us for the first time to go to the Dark Review and see the kind of work that we've been doing. We've especially tried to push the envelope for young researchers, early career researchers, PhD scholars, and this is mostly a passion project where we all try to kind of read up and engage with conversations that we're interested in, sometimes also conversations that we may not be interested in. On that note, we started the Dark Better as an initiative where we tried connecting with and engaging with scholars across the world, especially in areas where new work is happening. And we're very happy that we have Dr. Ollie Roy with us today, and I will introduce her momentarily. Before which, this is actually 45th BETUC in the series that we started, and the seventh BETUC, which is basically looking at a book review in terms of discussing a book. We'll at some point of time also want to commission the book under discussion today for a review. So if any one of you finds yourselves interested in reviewing this book for the Dark, please reach out to us. And that is about the Dark and the Dark Betuk. Today we have Dr. Ollie Roy, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name all right. Dr. Roy is an historian who has gained her PhD in history from Center for Historical Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. She's also a receiver of the prestigious Dr. Nasreen Ahmad Memorial Prize for her best work on gender in the gender section for the 2015 category. She's a historian and a gender scholar. And the book under discussion today is a book that Routledge, Taylor and Francis Group published in 2022 on a very interesting topic, which is chastity as reflected in ancient texts, precepts, practice, and portrayal, which is also something for which is been awarded a certificate of recognition from Bennett University and Times of India in the year 2023. She is interested in gender, in social and cultural and political issues, of course, from an historical and an historian's point of view. We're very happy to have her here. Thank you so much for taking out the time. As far as the format is concerned, most of you who join us every time would know, we would give you, Dr. Roy, 25 to 30 minutes to talk about the book, things that you think some of us should know about it. Some of us have read the book, so we'll come back with some questions, hopefully, and then once you've spoken, we'll open the room for discussion, questions, concerns, and so on and so forth. This is not strictly very coded in terms of that you have to finish in 30 minutes. If you think that you need more time and we are into it, then please go ahead. So when you're ready, we would like to listen to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Good evening, everyone. And before I proceed with the book discussion, I would like to thank the Dark, for creating a space to discuss the book, and also for being understanding and flexible to accommodate a change. So, this book has been a journey in itself. And I've always been intrigued by gender issues, and it became more intense during my master's day in JNU. And as I proceeded with my research and study, I realized that gender issues and the other issues related to it, they are much more nuanced and complex, and that made me more curious. Now, this particular book, it grew out of my doctoral research, and it took me 4 years more to convert the book into its present form. Revisiting and re-engaging with these sources. And if, like as I said, it has been a journey. It has been an arduous journey, but it has been a deeply personal one. As during this course of journey, I lost my sister and my supervisor, whose guidance and support, without her guidance and support, this not have been possible. And they continue to remain my inspiration in my academic journey. So, the main, like my supervisor's name, and, I would like to name her also, like, take her name, Professor Vijaya Ramaswamy. So, coming back to the book, the main theme of the book is chastity, how it has been conceptualized, practiced, and portrayed through different texts. And the texts that has been used for this book, they are vast, and there are multiple layers to these texts, and they're open to multiple interpretations as well. And I also understood in the course of my work that, such issues should be read from the perspective across genders and social categories, because as the experiences and context would vary. And, as I said, this work is based on text, it is based on a collection of narrative literature. And I found, narrative literature quite fascinating, because what I have observed from the text that I've used for my book, they form a bridge between the past, present, and the future. And the very aim of narrative literature, it is social interaction. So, there is a connection that is formed between the author, the narrator, and the audience. Now, I will be very briefly discussing about the nature of the sources that I have used in my book. It can be divided into Brahmanical and non-Brahmanical sources. For the Brahmanical, under the Brahmanical source, I've used the epics, that is the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and the Jatakas and Hala Satyasai, they are the non-Brahmanical sources. Now, the epics and Mahabharata, like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, they contain multiple layers of social formation, which in fact is helpful in tracing the evolution, or or this original, the root of an idea of or a concept or a practice. Now, as far as the epics are concerned, they're culmination of a long bardic traditions also. And if one read these texts, one would know the main characters of these texts. They mainly belong to the upper caste, or they are celestials. So, and what is interesting here is that it was through the iconization of these characters that made certain ideas and practices more convincing to the masses. And as far as, for example, chastity is concerned, in order to make it more compelling, a female voice was rendered to it. And the Purans, there are 18 Mahapurans. I've used 17 Mahapurans. Like I've excluded the Bhavishya Puran as it belongs to a later period. So even the Mahapurans, they were to recite, in popular gatherings. Now, different invasions, sects, they had a great impact on the formation of these texts. Now, I'd be coming to the Jatakas and the Hala Satyasai. They are the non-Brahmanical sources. And, as far as the theme of the book is concerned, they provide an alternate perspective to it. Now, what made Hala Satyasai, stand out is that, there's a female voice is given to the text. And on the other hand, the Jatakas, they, it displays the life of a rural and urban setting. Now, Hala, I'll give a brief introduction to Hala Satyasai and the Jatakas. Now, Hala was a South Indian Satavahana king around 1st century AD. And it was written by poets who did not belong to the masses. And again, what still I found very interesting about Hala Satyasai is that, it's a, there's it, there's a female voice that is quite existent throughout the text, and the prakrit that has been used for the text, is a stylized imitation of the language spoken by the people living south of the Vindhyas. And that is an area that has long remained beyond the touch of the North Indian Sanskrit literature. Now, uh, as far as Jatakas is concerned, the stories that has come down to us, they were written down in the form of that we know today around the 5th century AD. And the fact that the Jatakas, they are mentioned by name and also represented through sculptures as early as 3rd century BC, it also suggests that their compilation was a lengthy process. Now, the main aim behind choosing texts belonging to different genre, because it gives an interesting twist. Thus, they are very crucial to understanding the concept of chastity. Now, chastity. If you read these texts, uh, chastity was of great significance. It was through a chaste wife that a man could attain the three purusarthas, that is the dharma, artha, and kam. And chastity was of such importance, even the king also had to interfere. So, what is chastity? The concept, if we look at the very general meaning of what chastity is being loyal to one person. But chastity in ancient India, it was much more complex. Its implications, its connotations, they were not monolithic in nature. It is connected to sexuality, social order, and other social categories, institutions, and practices as well. Now, there are certain other aspects that need to be understood when we talk about chastity in ancient India. Now, it is also crucial to understand what conformity is, what deviance is, and also transgression. Whether she conformed willingly or she was conditioned to do so. And like when she transgressed, when she did it willingly, how did the society or the men they responded? And that includes both her parental and maternal household as well. While one delves deeper into what chastity is, one would understand how a woman's sexuality was considered, like how society was apprehensive of female sexuality. And it has been said that a virtuous woman who serves a woman is virtuous when she serves her husband, while a wicked woman destroys the race of her husband. And within this framework also, motherhood has also been exalted. She is considered responsible for the character of her progeny. She's revered when she gives birth to a son. And like a woman needed to be maintain purity of her mind, body, and soul throughout her life, even after the death of her husband. Also, another thing that while we talk about chastity, chastity was meant even for men, even though not as rigorous as it was meant for women. For example, it was considered sinful for a father to not get his daughter married at the appropriate time. Now here, marriage, as far as chastity is concerned, marriage was instrumental in maintaining the social order, and the institution of marriage is also, crucial for controlling a woman's body, and also maintaining other social practices such as intermixture of caste, that helped in maintaining the purity of the lineage. But on the other hand, what is again very interesting is that while we talk about such, you know, uh, restricted prescriptions for women, on the other hand, women who were thought that they would need protection, they resisted, they, raised their voice, when they were threatened or when their son or husband's life was at stake. And uh, there are very prominent, characters that is included in my book, and they are very much discussed about. But for today, I'll be talking about a few narratives, who, who appeared less in our discussions. And one of them, like I've mentioned in the book and have termed them as the other women, the Vaishyas and the Apsaras, who were considered as the quote unquote the public women. These were the women who did not conform to the norms, and they were sort of challenging the existing norms and traditions. And upper caste men and women both, they were discouraged to have any type of contact with the Vaishyas, the earthly public women. Again, because like, what is interesting again is that, the Vaishyas, even though they were disregarded in the Padma Purana, I found, references wherein, the text refers to a devout Vaishya who was engaged in worshipping deities and went to heaven. And in another story, from the same text, a Vaishya claims that a public woman is also a chaste woman. And if I look at the the non-Brahmanical sources, for example, now there are numerous stories in the Jatakas that narrate, how a woman belonging to the uh, lower category, like a Chandala woman or the daughter of a fruiterer, become the queen consort of a king. But again, there is a strong dichotomy that exists even within the Jatakas, that is a Buddhist text. In some instances, the son of a Chandala queen fell in love with a low caste woman, but the king again was shown to be unhappy about it. Now, this particular aspect shows how the society, was apprehensive about regarding the existing traditions. Now, the Jatakas, as I mentioned earlier, they give a purview of the urban and the rural settlements. The Jatakas, they include individuals, they include stories about individuals across social categories belonging to different social positions and status. So the Jataka, they bring, not only bring into light the sufferings of the lower caste, but also the struggle within. Now, I would be referring to a Jataka story in detail, to bring about the interrelation between gender and caste that even existed within Buddhism as well. So, in one of the birth stories, Buddha, he was named Matanga, was born outside the city as a Chandala's son named Matanga. One day, when he went to the town, a daughter of a Benares merchant called Ditha Mangalika abused him by calling him bad luck, and washed her eyes with water. The people also cried out against him. He was beaten up by people, and he decided not to go away until he gets Ditha Mangalika. Matanga stayed at the door of her father's house, and Ditha Mangalika was given to him on the seventh day. He told her to carry him on her back as he has grown weak due to being beaten up by people. Now she carried him on her back in front of the whole town and went to the Chandala settlement. Now, for a few days, Bodhisattva, he lived with her without transgressing the rules of caste. And Bodhisattva, in order to show highest honor to his wife, adopted a citizen. Now, subsequently, he was revered, and due to his blessings, Dita Mangalika, his wife, was also worshipped in the city. Now, though Dita Mangalika, she was born in a caste higher than to the Buddha, she was given to him for marriage for protecting the family's honor. This Matanga Jataka story, it suggests how the concept of gender and caste, they were intertwined. She had to compromise for her family's honor. That Buddha ordered her to carry him on her back implies, the submissive status of a wife. At the same time, he maintained the protocol of the caste system and gave her the highest honor by renouncing the world. Now, it was through his spiritual status that she gained recognition. Now, again, the Jataka stories, they clearly show the apprehension and fear that the society had in regard to female sexuality and the intermixture of caste. So we can see, we can observe a strong dichotomy within the Buddhist tradition. It is said that Bodhisattva also expressed his fear, like the Brahmins express their fear in regard to Kali, that in the days to come, the king who has sprung from a noble race will no longer trust old aristocracy and will honor the low-born and will also give their daughter unto them. So the Jatakas also indicate how a woman was not capable to control her life. For example, Vasantara, a king who retired into the forest with his wife and children, was ready to give away his wife and children as slaves. So women were also shown to be one of the primary causes for Buddhist brothers to leave the order. So even though the Jataka reflect how Buddhism helped women to evolve out of crisis, and how different views ran within the same order, but the mistrust regarding women was never completely eradicated. Now, as I have mentioned, like regarding the public women that included both the Vaishyas and the Apsaras in the celestial world. Within the Jataka, like within the Buddhist tradition, the courtesans, they are not defined as a monolithic group. And even though their profession was recognized, they are portrayed to have been desirous of being married, but at the same time, they were framed as vile and immoral. And even though she acquired a partner, he left her as he perceived her to be deceptive. Now, this distrust can also be seen within the spiritual embodiment in the Buddhist tradition. Now, when Buddha left his wife and son, when he came back, he praised his wife for maintaining her loyalty and devotion towards him, thus indicating the importance of purity and chastity that was held by various religious traditions. Now, lastly, Hala Satyasai, it portrays female voice and emotions. Now, even though it portrays a female voice and emotions, it does surrender to the social impositions. For example, it mentions how it is improper for women to have relationship before marriage. No, there are other instances as well. For example, in the Hala Satta side, a girl who is the village headman's daughter expresses her desperation to catch a glimpse of a lover. So, being the village headman's daughter, she had the responsibility to be righteous. Now, this again reflects the societal pressure that was inflicted upon women in premarital relationship. Now, the text advises a man not to ignore a woman who has disregarded all conventions for him. And the author also does not, like we do see in other texts, in the author, when it comes to the Hala Satyasai, does not label such a woman as impure, and this stands in sharp contrast to the Jatakas, wherein a man is prescribed to accept a woman as his wife only after testing her character. Now, I've mainly talked about how, women, certain norms and practices, how they were prescribed strictly for women. But as far as men are concerned, the meaning and implications of chastity for them differed. It is said that a man would lose his caste if he was dependent on a woman or practice adultery. This book, I would like to conclude now. This book examines how the concept of chastity was used as a social and political mechanism to control, and we can connect it to today's experience. As we see, there is still today in contemporary times, there is scrutiny of women's sexuality, moral policing, especially how they are being judged both within the public and private domain, and the existing definition of good and bad women. And historical ideas, they continue to inform the present social attitudes in different forms. Now, the discussion in contemporary times around women's autonomy, moral judgment, they do reflect older gendered framework. Women are still penalized for not conforming to traditional practices. Now, as I conclude, I would like to return, and revisit one of my, favorite, you can say, a character that has inspired me, that is Draupadi. And I would like to revisit, Draupadi's rage. Like, even though, it is, Draupadi's rage has often been remembered as anger and vengeance. No, it was her fight against injustices and demand for dignity. But her voice, still resonates with contemporary times. Her questions, the questions that she raised, it did not belong to the past. And, the questions she raises continue to reflect contemporary gendered beliefs and injustices. So Draupadi's rage, it is about conviction, a refusal, a response to social injustices and demand for accountability. So I'd like to end it here.
Thank you so much for that presentation, and stops at Draupadi. Are there any questions, concerns, comments? You can type them out in the chat box, or you could unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and raise your questions. Anyone? So while some of us may be formulating their questions, let me start the discussion and by asking what I would call a non-historian question. So for those who are not trained in history, and if one were to look at, and as you began your presentation with the connection of the narrative as something that holds tremendous amount of uh, power and as well as imagination when it comes to the literary figures, especially in the epics of Ramayana and then we have retellings, which kind of give voice to, of course, mythical status. But the interesting thing about retellings, and I have a number of fiction works that have come close to commenting on, and what would be called centering the female voice in the process where chastity is either attributed to or misattributed to such figures. I have Shubhranakha, for example, in mind. I have Draupadi, as you said, as one of the characters in mind, but also Kunti and Ahilya, and so on and so forth, right? So, one question that I have for you, and that could help me kind of understand, is that do we have uh, do we have material and historical texts from an academic point of view where the project of retelling, which gives agency to women's voices, can actually find itself substantiated by the text itself? That uh, there is enough in terms of it women being agentic about their agency to either choose or not to choose the path of chastity or its celebration or its negation in both Brahmanical and non-Brahmanical text. I have been very verbose and I've said almost everything, but I hope you get where I'm coming from. That uh, that I'm interested in the link that fiction or retellings which are fictionalized. Uh, is there a way that we could bridge that with texts? Do we have something in the text that can work for us?
Uh, whether we deal with fictional or non-fictional texts or literature, one has to understand, even if we talk about certain mythical or fictional characters, they belong to a certain period. The author framed them within a context, within a time period. So, like I would, answer it layer by layer. So, yes, they actually reflect, the social, political, or economic, uh, you know, uh, characters of that particular period. So be it fictional or non-fictional, because till a certain point, even I thought non-fictional literature would be more useful than fictional, but that is not the case. They are framed within a particular time period and context, as I said. And if I know understood your question rightly, uh, we often have been taught to write from our masters, to understand understand what the text is silent about. So for example, if you go through these texts, the epics, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and even Sita's surrender and going back to the earth, it is a form of resistance. Also Draupadi, why I say, I find her very inspiring. Even Sita, right? I find them very inspiring because, like I also mentioned while I was presenting, women who thought they need protection, they came out of certain crisis when they were threatened, when their, when their honor was threatened, or when their husband and son, their life was at stake. So these narrative literature, they are, I can't say like in general that, because it has to be context based also. There are certain instances wherein we have to understand whether she was conditioned to do so, or she is doing it out of willingness, right? That's why at the very beginning I said, when a woman is transgressing, it is very important to understand the response from the society and from the, from her husband or from her family. That, that tells a lot about, the history of oppression and resistance. So there are multiple layers. Hopefully I've answered your, question.
Yes, yes, thank you so much. We have one in the chat box. I'm going to read it out for everybody's benefit. It says, why Indian, someone named Abhishek, we would have loved to know who they are, but nevertheless, Abhishek says, why Indian society has not been progressed more in comparison to Western societies, especially after globalization and liberalism, when it comes to chastity and other stereotypical norms associated with women, why globalization and liberalism isn't able to reach villages of India. Seems like a slightly broader question, but uh, if you'd like to respond to that, Dr. Roy.
Thank you, Abhishek, for the question. I think there, again, I would say that even when we talk about ancient Indian literature, if we take into the history of transgression, by women, I would not say, that we were, there were issues, but we were, a backward society when it comes to gender, because we have quite a lot of instances wherein women have raised their voices, where women, they did not uh, follow what were imposed on them, right? And if I take it from there, and if I, because like traditional practices and norms, they still do, do have a significant impact on the decisions or the habits that we have developed. But what I see, now, because I continue to work on gender issues of contemporary times as well, maybe the, the language has changed, but it is still there. But what I see, women's rage has, how do I put it, women's rage, they do not, I would say, they no more care for how the society label them as, because when it comes to women's rage, and from experience I would say, where women's rage has been labeled and have been called names. But today when we talk about women's rage, we have, various, even certain cases where women's rage has actually, helped in getting justice. And that, while we talk about gender parity, it is not possible that, we achieve gender parity with the empowerment or of one section, right? And when it, again, I would disagree, that the Western world has, has, when it comes to gender parity, they have, achieved quite a lot. Because even now we see, even in the Western world, how they, they are struggling to even recognize, bodily autonomy of women, right? So, you know what would be useful here is to, whether we are in the Western world or in the Eastern world, we have to go back, for example, if there is a particular practice, we need to go back to its root causes and see, what were the reasons or the ideas behind it, because it is time based, it is context based. So we need to uncondition ourselves as well. We need to revisit our, traditions, and decide accordingly. So hopefully, Abhishek, I've answered your question.
And you're free to kind of ask another follow-up question so long as the time period allows. We now have Sakshi Wadhwa, who's with the TAG team. Thank you so much, Dr. Roy, for such a nuanced presentation. Okay, a PhD student at Center for Study of Law and Governance, JNU. I just wanted to ask if you could share more on the difference between chastity and obscenity. Uh, can we say the latter is more pre-colonial while the latter comes closer to the colonial framework? Sakshi, I'm assuming you meant former and latter. Furthermore, can you please share more on chastity and desire? For instance, can we say chastity was used as a tool to regulate the complex aspects of desire, in general or sexual? Also, could you please elaborate more on more male chastity and instances of the same in Brahmanical and non-Brahmanical sources? Three difficult questions. Yeah, former with chastity and chastity being more pre-colonial and obscenity is something more colonial. And yeah, those are the three questions, Dr. Roy.
Uh, Sakshi, it is right. Okay. Sakshi, when it comes to chastity and obscenity, if you are saying obscenity, the concept of obscenity is more of a colonial product. It again, you know, uh, depends, right? So I wouldn't say that obscenity was a product of the colonial period. Maybe its implications, its definitions have varied, but its existence. If you go through these texts, you would see that they were framed in a different manner. I wouldn't say uh, that obscenity was a product of the colonial period and chastity of the former. Because when it comes to literature, traditions, and the ideas that we're talking about in history, they are very diversified, right? Again, chastity and obscenity would mean different for like it would differ from one social category to another. And uh, if you would tell me what the second question was.
Um, Chastity and desire, and how it could be read as a complex, to regulate complex aspect of desire. That is the second one.
So, see, as I mentioned, chastity, it was used as a tool to control female sexuality. Now, when I say female sexuality, it has not only social but political and economic connotations as well. You know, uh, as I also mentioned in the presentation, that marriage, for example, if I'm just giving one example, that marriage, it was a very significant institution and instrument for controlling a woman's body, also her also controlling her sexuality, that also includes her desires. So it was to navigate it in a manner that would help in maintaining the social other social practices and customs. So it is not just her desires that I would say that chastity was became a necessity, but there were other social that social balance that was framed by the the patriarchs of a particular time. And the third question.
Male,
Male
male,
chastity.
male chastity and sources from both Brahmanical and non-Brahmanical spaces.
So yes, while I was presenting my this as I said, it has been a long journey. So it was like in my MPhil, while I just started to work on chastity, I found because when we talk about chastity, the first thing that comes to our mind is women, right? So while I was presenting, I did, in my dissertation, I mentioned something called male chastity. And one of our professors, in our in JNU, she said, there's nothing called male chastity, right? But if you go through the text, you would see that yes, we have something called male chastity as well. It might, it is not, as I said, it is not as rigorous as it were for females. So for example, male chastity would mean um, you know not being involved with another woman, getting married to a woman only for the sake of progeny, right? And also, controlling sexual desires as well, right? So these are, and there are certain instances across the text which mentions, that a man would be punished if he gets involved with a woman belonging to, another social category. So there are instances of male chastity as well. It is just that, the implications or the nature, the rigorous nature of it varies.
Sakshi says, thank you. We have another long question, which I'm going to read again for everybody's benefit. The person says, hey, I'm Samriddhi. Hi, Samriddhi. Pursuing history majors from Hansraj College. I'm assuming this is Delhi University. My question is, chastity is often seen as a tool for spiritual development in the Puranas, Jatakas, and other texts you mentioned, but there always remains this asymmetry of expectations from male and female. The females are often seen as the devotees and the males as the object of devotion, etc. Did you find these texts talking about the idea of applying the same expectations of chastity to both genders? That is question number one. Two, do these texts give some logical, rational reasoning behind the different expectations? And third, was the spiritual narrative mostly a facade to control the females? Those are three set of questions. Thank you, Samriddhi.
Okay, one thing I forgot, Sakshi also asked, which sources, I guess, one can refer for male chastity. So you would find, when we talk about chastity, the concept of punishment also, is also very important here. Ordeal and punishment. So you would find those instances wherein, men are being punished for transgressing. Again, I'm saying not as rigorous as women, and you would find them in Quran and also in Jatakas as well. So then I guess it was Samriddhi's question. Yes, Samriddhi, you're very right when you said, the women are treated as devotees while, the men are treated as, as someone they worship. And, it is said that women who, worshipped, who serve their husbands, they would attain salvation. And in some cases, like in some Purans and in Jatakas, it is also mentioned that how women, chaste women specifically, because they were considered as quote unquote pure women, right? They should not be, abandoned by their husbands. So again, I would say, when if you change the sex or gender, again, it was not that, women again, even when I talk about this, there's this earthly and the celestial world. When we talk about literature, a narrative literature in history, so even though it was given as a warning to men, not to transgress, not to get involved with another woman. But again, as I said, chastity was not as rigorous for men. The same applies here, that the way the men were considered, as the center of a woman's life, it was not the same for women, right? So again, it differs. Are we talking about the celestial world? Are we talking about the earthly world? Which social category also we are talking about? And also the religious tradition that we are focusing on. So, and I guess third question.
Was there a spiritual narrative which was a facade? That's the third question.
No, I cannot give a generalized answer that spirituality was a facade. Because again, if we talk about spirituality when it comes to men and women, yes, it has been conceptualized in a different manner, but we see, despite all these restrictive and limitations, that women are attaining spirituality and salvation without you know uh, uh, a patriarchal connection, right? We do find those reference in the epics and also in the jatakas. So again, for example, Ahalya, she obtained salvation only through a male connection, but it is not the same across. So I would not say that it was a facade. Again, it differs from one text to another. Hope, Samriddhi, I've answered your question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? You can unmute yourself, write us over text. Okay, so we'll come to a close of the session. It's also time. In another 4 minutes, it'll be 5. So if you have a question, you can ask now. Otherwise, you can also write to Dr. Roy. We have her email ID with us. And if anybody is interested in engaging with the work further and wants to ask her more pointed questions, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer some of those over email. And we could, with her permission, share that email with you if you write to us. And on that note, we will bring this particular DAC session better to a close. Thank you so much, Dr. Oli Roy, for sharing your work and taking out the time to talk to our small group. With the better, one of the things that we're trying to do, as I said earlier also, is to engage with work that we normally do not do, or engage in conversations across disciplines. So I learned a lot personally today in terms of getting acquainted with work or conversations that I may have not looked at in a while. So thank you so much. Samriddhi is also thanking you for the wonderful discussion, and she's also thanking us for organizing it. Thank you so much, all the participants who took out time on a Saturday evening to listen to what did chastity mean in ancient India. Thank you so much. Next Saturday, we have another Betak, and we'll be talking about Ambedkar and a new book on Ambedkar and Nietzsche provocations. Thank you so much. And I will now end the session. And if Dr. Roy wants to say something, hers would be the last word.
Yeah, a few lines. I know it's a Saturday evening. I have followed the dark for a long time, right? So even before you started with the better and the book review, so thank you for having me and giving a space, as I always say, for this conversations to happen, right? And also I would just like to add a few lines when it comes to history or gendered issues. Uh, uh, it's some no we it is not sometimes not we cannot give a generalized response. So whenever we because we have been very careful in what, the context, and the background behind, because, the literature also, if you go through the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or any other text belonging to the ancient Indian period, you would see that there are multiple layers to it. There have been interpolations because they have been written for centuries. So you would see the stories of particular characters being mentioned in another text, and they have been portrayed in a different manner. So all these makes it a little more complex. So hopefully I have answered the questions and the queries that they had. So thank you so much for the questions. It also helps me in revisiting what I wrote years back. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. And I'm now going to close the session. And this session would also be available on YouTube. So if some of your friends who wanted to join and couldn't watch, it'll always be there on the Dark Tech channel for us to revisit. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.